Coming up today, a call for cooperation and unity from President Park Geun-hye as the 20th National Assembly officially opens. She says labour and regulatory reforms are essential if Korea wants to tackle its economic problems. America is in a state of mourning after the senseless murder of 50 people at a gay nightclub in Orlando. Prior to the shooting spree, the gunman reportedly called 911, pledging allegiance to ISIS. Plus, South Korea's defense minister prepares to visit Paris for talks with his French counterpart on the threats posed by North Korea. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 13th of June. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. We begin in Parliament, where the 20th National Assembly had its official opening ceremony this morning. President Park Geun-hye delivered an opening speech to the full Assembly in which she called on lawmakers to work with her administration and one another to boost the economy, improve the people's livelihoods and counter North Korea. Our Presidential Office correspondent Song Ji-sun starts us off.
Harmony and collaboration. President Park said the two concepts are what the people anticipate from the new parliament and called on lawmakers to put the people first. She added that there can be no ruling or opposition parties when it comes to people. Pointing to the economic challenges facing the country, the president also called for passage of bills aimed at reviving the economy, as the previous assembly declined to pass reform bills related to her key policy initiatives.
앞으로 20대 국회에서는 이런 민생과 직결되는 법안들이 좀 더 일찍 통과되어 국민들의 고통을 조금이라도 덜어드릴 수 있도록 협조해 주시기를 바랍니다.
President Park also mentioned her recent trips to East Africa and Iran and characterized them as attempts to explore new markets, while noting that restructuring and deregulation are the only way to create new growth engines and jobs. She also invited lawmakers to join her efforts to gain international consensus and turn up the pressure on North Korea, and thanked them for passing a North Korean human rights bill in the 19th National Assembly.
앞으로 북한이 핵을 포기하고 폐쇄와 고립에서 벗어나 남북이 보다 평화롭고 번영된 삶을 누리는 길을 열어가는데 제20대 국회가 함께해 주실 것으로 믿습니다.
President Park, in seeking to lay the groundwork for a more cooperative politics, called lawmakers a partner in state affairs. She also reiterated her vow last month to improve communication with the parliament and hold regular meetings with the leaders of the main political parties. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
The newly elected Assembly Speaker also offered his remarks at today's opening ceremony. Jong Seo-kyun emphasised Parliament's duty to serve the people. In addition to that, he said lawmakers have a duty to put Korea's stagnant economy back on track as the country is going into a long economic recession with rising unemployment, a low birth rate and deepening social polarisation. He urged rival parties to work together to tackle the challenges the country is facing and vowed to do his best to support them. He concluded by expressing his hope that the 20th National Assembly will achieve a great deal for Korea. The deadliest mass shooting in US history has left 50 people dead and dozens injured in the US state of Florida. President Barack Obama has condemned the mass shooting, calling it an attack on all Americans. Kim Mok-yeon has the story.
The gunman, armed with an assault rifle, killed 50 people and left at least 53 injured in the terror attack at a gay nightclub in Orlando. Police killed a suspect who has been identified as Omar Mateen inside the Pulse nightclub. He was a U.S. citizen and a son of Afghan immigrants. NBC News reports that Mateen called the emergency services before the attack and swore allegiance to the Islamic State militant group. ISIS later claimed responsibility through its Amaq news agency. However, Florida Senator Bill Nelson says links with ISIS have not been confirmed and more details are needed before reaching conclusions. U.S. President Barack Obama condemned the attack, calling it an act of terror and an act of hate on all Americans. He ordered all official flags throughout the U.S. be lowered to half-staff this week to honor the victims.
Today, as Americans, we grieve the brutal murder, a horrific massacre of dozens of innocent people. We pray for their families who are grasping for answers with broken hearts. We stand with the people of Orlando who have endured a terrible attack on their city.
Family and friends of the victims have gathered outside Orlando Regional Medical Center for news about their loved ones. The mother of a possible victim was desperate to hear news from her son, who was in the nightclub during the shooting.
My son was at the nightclub with his boyfriend and other friends, and I know that his boyfriend has been shot multiple times and is in the emergency room. But I don't know where my son is. No one can tell me where my son is.
The international community has spoken out too. French President François Hollande expressed his horror at the terror attack and said that France fully supports America at this difficult time. Pope Francis also described his deepest feelings of horror and condemnation and denounced the senseless hatred of the shooting. Kim Mo-gyan, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's defence minister will meet with his French counterpart in Paris this week for talks on North Korea's ever-growing nuclear threats. According to South Korea's defence ministry on Monday, Han Min-gu will depart Tuesday for a three-day trip aimed at enhancing defence cooperation between the two countries. It will mark the first trip to France by a South Korean defence minister since 2007. Topping the agenda are North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile threats and denuclearising the Korean peninsula. Minister Han is also scheduled to visit the Korean War Memorial in France and speak to students at several defence-related universities. North Korea's leader says he will continue to develop the regime's nuclear weapons program in defiance of international calls to denuclearize. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Monday that Kim Jong-un made the remarks while on a visit to the National Defense University, though it did not give the date of the visit. Kim also emphasized the institute's mission is to foster talent in order to consolidate North Korea's status as a nuclear weapons state. He reportedly touted the university's achievements in modernizing the regime's military equipment and said he will make the institute one of the world's best. This is the first time Kim has visited a defense-related institute since the North Workers' Party Congress in May, where he hailed North Korea's nuclear successes. Now, China's gross debt-to-GDP ratio exceeded that of the United States for the first time ever at the end of last year. According to the Bank for International Settlements, the debt-to-GDP ratio for China's growing debt pile was 254.8%, topping the United States' 250.6%. According to analysts, the uptrend of China's debt is expected to continue, hindering the nation's economic growth in the near future. China's ratio of household debt against its GDP also jumped to 39.5%, and its government debt to GDP ratio was at 44.4%. South Korea's household debt to GDP ratio was 88.4%. That is the largest among emerging economies, and with South Korea's central bank recently cutting the key rate to a record low, its already high levels of debt are expected to grow even further. China-based smartphone suppliers swept 8 of the top 12 ranks in the first 3 months of 2016, contradicting earlier reports that suggested China's smartphone market was actually slowing. According to a report by market researcher IC Insights, China's Huawei, Oppo and Xiaomi were in the top 5 after Samsung and Apple. And while Samsung Electronics and Apple surpass the other companies by a long shot, their total smartphone shipments are expected to decrease slightly by the end of the year. 5 of the 8 Chinese companies are expected to log 29% growth to 135 million units. India's Micromax made the list for the first time, and it knocked off China's Gionee from this quarter's top 12 ranking. Now, South Korea and the United States are teaming up to study air quality on the Korean peninsula. The first phase of the multi-million-dollar project has just come to an end, and findings are already providing researchers with an insight into the actual root of the problem. Shin Se-min reports.
It's an aircraft packed with scientific equipment, and more specifically, the complex tools needed to study air quality over Korea. They call it a laboratory in the sky, as this 50-year-old jet has been completely redesigned and refitted, with filters sticking out of its windows and air tubes spread around to collect air samples from ground level to hundreds of kilometers above ground. Called the KoreaUS Air Quality Study, or KoreaUS, the joint research is the first time NASA has teamed up with an international partner. This time, Korea's National Institute of Environmental Research. And together, the team is conducting a collaborative study by tying together aircraft, satellite, and ground-based measurements to measure air quality on the Korean peninsula.
This DC-8 turned into flying laboratory has taken a total of 20 flights over Korea in the past 6 weeks. That's much more than initially scheduled, as the air quality system has been much worse than expected.
Korea ranked a lowly 173rd out of 180 countries in terms of air quality on this year's Environmental Performance Index by Yale University, a result caused by decades of rapid industrial development and polluting power plants.
When we were coming down to land, what we assumed was the end of our flight, they actually couldn't see the runway well enough. And so they veered off at the last moment, and is just a sign of how turbid and how hazy the atmosphere was at that time.
Korea has long accused China for much of the air pollution in the country, saying yellow dust blowing in from the deserts of Mongolia and northern China has caused such hazy and congested skies. But the scientists crisscrossing the skies over the Korean peninsula say that's not strictly the case.
We have seen a lot of pollution coming from local sources, petrochemical plants, coal plants, and we've also done a lot of flights where we've tried to look at the external influences coming from the LFC, and so we're still looking into those data, but we have found that on a lot of days where we've had stagnant air, we have seen a lot of emissions from Korea itself.
Researchers say that with the current level of air pollution, there's no doubt it's very detrimental to the health of the Korean people. But one thing is for sure, this study shows the Korean government realizes the severity of the problem, and unlike many in the region, is at least seeking ways to help the nation breathe a little easier. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Osan.
Now to another man-made problem, desertification. It's threatening an increasing number of developing nations affected by climate change. Myanmar is one such country, which is why South Korea is providing official development assistance for forest management projects to try and address this huge problem. Gonsoa with the details.
Digging, planting, filling, pouring. Why are roughly 30 Koreans helping area residents plant trees in the middle of Myanmar's central city of Bagan? It's part of a project by the Korea International Cooperation Agency, or KoreaUS, to help the country prevent desertification and lower the risk to people's livelihoods. Jaokbinkan is a village of around 300 households, and most residents make a living by farming. They get their daily water supply from this reservoir, which KoreaUS helped them dredge up last year, along with planting trees nearby. That was crucial to preserving as much water as possible. The organization had previously provided every household with efficient wood-burning ovens, which helped save both trees and energy.
We used to burn around 10 pieces of firewood to cook, and now we use around half the amount.
Not far from the village is the third out of 4 afforestation sites. These are part of a KoreaUS project seeking to plant trees on hundreds of hectares of land and raise residents' awareness of the seriousness of desertification.
We started the first project in 1998. Back then, the residents used the young trees for firewood, leading to losses of almost 60%. That's why we also initiated an education program for the residents to boost the results.
This is one of the driest places in Myanmar. And due to climate change, the amount of precipitation is getting lower year by year. The reason why there need to be more trees planted in areas like these. Experts say other regions get about 2,800 millimeters of rain every year, while the central dry zone gets just 500, and El Niño is making things worse. The principle of the freshly planted trees works in that the roots absorb rain, turning the soil from sandy to moist. The project also aims to create more jobs for the residents, giving them responsibility to manage their forests, boost agricultural productivity, and improve their quality of life. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News, Bagan.
Well, that's all we have for now on this Monday lunchtime here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom. Thank you, as always, for tuning in to our newscast. We'll be back throughout the day with more bulletins. Our next one coming up at 3 p.m. Korea time with our very own Han Da-eun. So until then, goodbye.